Plus cop talk, current events, entertainment, and more. Joined by America's favorite Jersey girl, Robin DiLauri. It's the King and the Cop.
It's March 28th, Tuesday. Our Angels are living in fear. I'm Tommy Cetnar with the King and the Cop. Robin DiLauri's off tonight, and Jim Leyritz is off tonight. Here in spirit, we got a special show. We decided that we wanted to talk strictly about this horrific shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. Yet again, our kids are living in fear, and the schools are a shooting gallery. Tonight, we have three New Jersey experts. Chief Chris Canizzo, East Hanover PD. Retired Jeff Gale, New Jersey State Police. And my sister, Ro Manghisi, retired Captain Chief of Staff of the New Jersey State Police and security expert. Welcome, guys. I appreciate you coming on this late at 10 o'clock. I know this all hits your hearts every time we see news like this. Ro, Jeff, you're retired. But, Chief, you got one of the biggest responsibilities in the state of New Jersey and Morris County here. Every time you see something like this, I'm sure a chill goes up your spine. What were your thoughts when you saw it yesterday? And before we get to Ro and Jeff, you had to be proud of what I'm calling the 14-minute heroes. This is the example of what you're supposed to do when you get to a scene. What's your thoughts?
They were definitely trained well. They eliminated the threat immediately, which we know we've seen since Columbine, since '99. They had to go in and neutralize the threat. My knee-jerk reaction when I found out was nauseating. Here we go again. You know, part of 123, close to 130 mass shootings alone in 2023. It's disgusting, and it's preventable.
You know, Chief, you know, we talk about this all the time, and it's a bipartisan thing. It doesn't matter Republican or Democrat. I want to believe that in our hearts when we see something like this. It hits us as parents first, or aunts or uncles. And, you know, later in the show, I'm going to bring on one of the Board of Ed members and her daughter, because I really want to get a student's perspective of how are these kids feeling now? You know, and as the chief who I know in our town here, and we are very good friends, and I go to the football games and I see you there in the baseball games, but you still, although you're a parent yourself, you have this tremendous responsibility in all your schools here. And how, when you hear something like this, what's your first thought? Do you go on lockdown? Is there a copycat thing running through your head? What were your thoughts the other day?
100%. I'm afraid, you know, we're going to probably jump into this, but it's coming out that there's mental illness here. And when you're saying copycat, that does alarm me. What I will tell you locally, we have great partnerships with not only my superintendent, with the state. The state police are excellent. We get guidance from the FBI, and we utilize any tool they give us. Locally here in East Hanover, I wear my heart on my sleeve, right? And our families here. So we make it, we have proactive patrol in the schools, our visibility. We have a healthy emergency response team, ESU. I know the state police has a teams unit. We're not as good as them, but we train and we focus nonstop on not only the school threat, but an assessment before it does occur.
Right. Jeff Rowe, Chief mentions the teams unit, and there's basically the SWAT team of the state police. That hits close to my heart because, you know, my brother was in charge of that at one point before he moved up the ranks, Ro, which you moved him up in the ranks as the chief of staff in the state police in the day. And we're like family. Our fathers were on the job together. We like have 100 years of Manghisi Cetnar blood through your cousins and, you know, my brother and my brother-in-law and my father, a first bomb technician in Newark, and your father. Ro, we've seen it all. And in our day, you and I worked together, and we're working undercover, and we did buy and bust and went through a door. And the question I have to you is, we didn't have the equipment back in there. We ran through doors without any vest, and we got shot at, and we did all that. And we, you know, you kind of did what you had to do. Yesterday, I saw a little bit of old school. They weren't lumping up helmets and equipment, and I'm not knocking that. Thank God they have that. But sometimes you just got to go balls out and go in. When you saw that yesterday, did you reflect back in the day when you were doing it?
Yeah, I did. I actually thought about, you know, people like you and I, you run to the danger because you know you have to stop the threat, just as the chief mentioned. And I think it falls back to training, like having mutual aid agreements, training with other agencies. That's a key component of this. I was communicating with a good friend of mine who's a Nashville police officer, and the one thing he sent me in a text, he said, I'm going to read it to you. He said, the emotional fallout of the divided arguments are the hardest part. And he's right. What comes out of this, I mean, we have to look at the safety. And, that's why, thank God, we have people like my former colleague, Jeff Gale, who was a captain in the state police, and he's an expert on school security. And, I think he can really shed some light on the fact that, I always say, fail to plan, plan to fail. And I think that's why you have to do the assessments and the ongoing training to really provide, safety for the children, the parents, the teachers, and the administrators. And it all comes down to, training. Those guys relied on their training today. They knew their mission. They executed.
They sure did. Jeff Rowe talks about you did 25 years and you're highly decorated, retired captain of state police, but you didn't just decide to go home and collect your pension. You decided to take even a tougher job. These are our kids and you have more of a responsibility. We're talking off the air. You trained over 35,000 people in this world, but it doesn't seem to be enough, Jeff. It's not stopping. And when you hear politicians get up there and say, it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault, as parents, we don't want to hear that crap anymore, whether we were law enforcement or not. What was going through your mind yesterday when you saw this yet again?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of what I live and breathe every day. Right. And that 35,000, that's face to face. So I've got a pretty good pulse on the wide array of individuals that are out there working in our schools, from athletic directors to school psychologists to school nurses to administrators and educators to law enforcement and security working in schools. I've trained all of them, and they've trained me. The important thing about recognizing that is that's 35,000 people face to face that I have received feedback from, and I've received great ideas and information from. And in the beginning, when I started doing this, it was very difficult to get those communities to engage. They would rather believe that having to talk about this, having to conduct the drills. I've probably observed at least 300 to 400 active shooter drills in schools in New Jersey. Getting them to engage was very difficult because it was a reminder that they're vulnerable and they'd rather not be reminded. We've had a paradigm shift in that philosophy with the educators in New Jersey since I started this work in 2015, the beginning of 2015. And when I saw what unfolded, when I saw the body cam video, let's get a little perspective on how truly important, and the chief pointed to this, that law enforcement response is. If you remember, I mean, obviously we're stacking this up against Uvalde, right? So this incident, you brought up 14 minutes. It was actually 11 minutes response time from the 911 call to law enforcement's dispatching that shooter. It took 3 minutes to get a 911 call out of that building. And that's one of the things that we train very hard on, is being able to quickly and effectively communicate the emergency. Because if you remember the Ned Pepper bar shooting in Dayton, Ohio in 2019, think about this number. In 32 seconds, law enforcement engaged and killed the shooter. 32 seconds from his first shot until he was down on the ground and done. In 32 seconds, he killed 9 people and injured 17 others. 32 seconds, 9 people dead. So think about the Uvalde tragedy, where law enforcement stood on the scene for 77 minutes and did nothing, and put those numbers together and recognize what the Chiefs team is now confronted with in getting into that school quickly and stopping that shooter. And that was the thing that we saw. But there are dynamics that we try to train schools in. If you watch that body cam video, we've got a lot of vacant, unlocked, open classrooms, which caused them to conduct a search absent hearing the gunfire immediately. We don't want to be searching a school, right, Chief? We want to be going immediately to the gunfire. Right. But if I don't hear the gunfire, which it's apparent that they didn't when they first entered the building, I'm confronting empty rooms. I've got to clear those rooms one at a time. And every 10 to 15 seconds, statistically, is a gunshot in an active shooter scenario. So these are the types of things that we work on. Sandy Hook, the lesson from Sandy Hook Elementary is hardening your schools. The ballistic film on the interior doors to prevent what happened at Covenant was something that we learned from Sandy Hook. but wasn't implemented in that school. And so the shooter takes advantage. They shoot the glass, walk into the building, and begin shooting. So these are things that we've been training in New Jersey for a long time, guidance we've been giving out here for a long time, but it's very difficult to get people on board and get that mindset that we all have that spend our lives in law enforcement.
Chief, Roe, Jeff, myself, we probably never wore a body camera in our day when we were going through a door. Not only do these cops have to go in and risk their lives, but their life is live. It's real time. They're going to be judged for every move they make. As we learn, Uvalde deserves that black eye. They really do. These guys, they did the right thing, but these schools somehow still are not paying attention. Like a lot of them are becoming soft targets. It's this subject had a blueprint to go to another school, but thought it might be too difficult because they had better security and they were locked up. In this case, lackadaisical again. And we got six people died, but 3 9-year-olds.
Tom, it's hard to
category, Chief, or what? Or not educated enough? I don't understand.
No, a couple things. One, you can't over communicate between the general public, the schools, and the police, right? 2 is they teach you in law enforcement there's 10 deadly errors, right? Unfortunately, we have to now teach these teachers and these students too. And one might be preoccupation, you're lax. Evidently, that did occur there, right? Locally, as a police chief, also we spoke. When I hear funding's not there, I don't always buy into that because I'm a big believer in, I've been chief 7 years, you phase things in. That's the idea of a budget, capital items. There's grants out there. So in this day and age, there's really no excuse that the money's not there as well. Federally government, and there's a way to work through that. And I know you guys and girls at the state police know what I'm talking about between FEMA, FBI. It's out there. There's groups out there, retired troopers who have phenomenal guidance, expertise. So why not? We just need to over communicate. And unfortunately, it seems like this will occur. I call it an epidemic, but it does happen in other countries too. So it is a pandemic. I hate to use that word because everyone uses that with COVID, but this is an issue. This is a big issue.
When I was detailed to the FBI out of Newark PD in the first first World Trade Center bombing, they said we didn't communicate enough. And we all know this. We didn't share information. I mean, that's why we started these task force. The state police got together with bigger cities. Then the FBI started picking on people. Ro, is it time? You're a security expert now. Is it time? Do we bring in security people, armed security? Do we mandate that? Is that somewhere that the security, we go to the politicians, the lobbyists? Do we start mandating that there's every school has an armed guard in it? 2, 3? We give billions of dollars away to other countries. How many times are we going to watch our angels get knocked off out of life at 5 years old, 9 years old, 15 years old? What's your thought on that? You got your ear to the ground. What are you hearing?
Yeah, well, like we do some, school securities, and it comes down to, like the chief said, sometimes it's a budget issue. Sometimes the school, if it's a charter school or a private school, then there's different rules that they abide by. If it's a public school, like the chief said, he has a good rapport with the superintendent, and then maybe, you work together on that. So I think there's a lot, you have a parent-teacher group. They have a lot to say. So I think you really have to do like the work that Jeff does, a really good assessment. Can we train these people? Are there enough? Is the armed security staff adequate? Sometimes when there's a budget and I see it, they said, oh, we just need 1 guard. That's not enough. That's never enough. And they think that that's just, the way to put a Band-Aid on a bigger problem. So I think you either have to have a trained force and do local law enforcement know who the security officers are? Are they wearing a uniform? That wouldn't stop somebody from even coming in a security guard uniform if they wanted to. So I think you have to do like the work that Jeff does. I said, a total assessment of the situation and, the buy-in from the community as well.
Jeff, my father used to tell this story. He was the first bomb technician in Newark, and he had he used to say it was a joke. He had, they said, what do you have as equipment? He said, well, I have a roll of string, an extra pair of sneakers, rubber sneakers, and an extra pair of underwear. Why? He said, I tied the string to the bomb, make sure I had rubber sneakers on so I could run. And you know what happens to me when the bomb goes off. I need to change my underwear. It's not a laughing matter tonight, but his point was they had no equipment until something happened. And then there was a pipe bomb in City Hall and police headquarters that my father carried out. And after that, they had bomb trucks, bomb equipment, all this nonsense. Long story short, are you finding when incidents happen like this, do people spend more money? Do they go out and hire the likes of yourself? What do you see out there?
So it's a real deep and complicated mess, honestly. The chief's aware of this. Back in 2015, the final report from the Governor's School Security Task Force came out, which I was fortunate enough to be a liaison to. And that report generated the Class 3 law enforcement officer in New Jersey. And the reasoning behind that designation was, and the unions played a big part in the designation, regular police officers as SROs are expensive, right? And most of your PDs are thinly staffed to begin with. The specials, as the special twos, were used, to fill in and to handle matters across town, not just in schools. So they devised a Class 3 in New Jersey with the idea that a retired law enforcement officer at a reduced pay rate, working with police powers only in a school and only on the campus, can't be redirected by the chief to handle accidents or conduct investigations. They're strictly placed in the schools, was the answer, the best answer that could be formulated for this issue. The problem is it's hard to find enough Class 3s. If you have like Hamilton Township in Mercer County has 26 schools. Very difficult to find that many Class 3 officers that are willing to go out and do that work. And the problem with mandating it is once you make a mandate, you have to fund it. And so the state is not looking to do, the unfunded mandate saying you have to have this, but there's no money for it. So, there's been a lot of different stopgap measures. Many schools are very fortunate to have SROs. Some have to say, you know what, we'll go with the Class 3, but some have no other resort but security officers. The colonel of the state police cannot hire a Class 3 officer. So state police covered areas, I think there's 117 of those schools, do not have the capability of a Class 3 officer. So how do we put security in those schools? And, once you get to armed security, it becomes a mixed bag. Now you're armed in a school population. What's your ongoing training? Where's your oversight? The chief has oversight over his SROs if he has them and manages to keep them trained. But how do we do that with security officers and be assured that they're capable of discharging a weapon in that environment? So what we see is this wave, right? We have a Columbine and everybody's up here, and then we coast back down to the bottom and we get a Sandy Hook, and we coast back down and we get a Parkland. And that's kind of how the dynamic seems to go from my perspective. Everybody wants to throw everything they can at something, and then they want to ignore it, as soon as the problem is perceived to have gone away. Uvalde, the lesson from Sandy Hook, a door that locks from inside with no special tool with a gross motor skill rather than coming out in the hall with the key was one of the lessons learned from Sandy Hook. We see in Uvalde teachers actually coming out in the hall under gunfire trying to lock their doors. So, where was the money to fix the doors? New Jersey's got a lot of legislation out there for new school construction. If you build a school in New Jersey now, you have to have an access control vestibule at your main entrance, and the interior doors have to be coated with ballistic resistant film so that you can't shatter that window. But what does that do for the rest of the building? And where's the money to get all the ground floor windows with ballistic resistant film to prevent that? So every school is different, every school within every district. And Chief, I'm not sure how many schools you have. I know I did some visits in East Hanover pre-pandemic. I can't remember how many schools you have up there, but each one of them is unique and different. And one of our biggest issues really isn't getting law enforcement or administrators or teachers on board at this point. It's the parents. The climate and culture in that school begins at home, and parents have to recognize that. We're looking at Oxford, Michigan, where we have 2 parents being charged because they were confronted with their son in school with a gun that they purchased for him in his school bag, and they refused to send him home or believe that he was a problem. And, he immediately leaves that meeting and goes and shoots up the school. So that parent community is really one of the hardest to engage and get to buy in. There are some that are scared half to death and others that believe it'll never happen with their kid. And that's really one of the hardest things to sell, I think, is getting the parents engaged in the process.
Chief, do you, and I'm careful in the way I phrase this, are we monitoring with our schools kids? Obviously, this is another mental health issue. Are we monitoring that? What are we allowed to share? Are schools getting better at sharing information to give it to the?
Well, I will tell you, we partnered up with a company, JCT. We have well over 200 cameras visible from our phones. The officers sign in, so we monitor at the police desk and the car. We have great communication with the schools. They offer school radios through our OEM. We bought grants, so if they're not talking, we're talking with them. We joined in with other communication styles of Share 911, but also with the schools jumped into. I believe there's a telemetry where if you mention the word, their words, not mine, gun, a student to student, there's a flag and the principal will alert on that. So that's another good investment we did. Look, I'm a probability-based person. Here in East Hanover, I'm trying to mitigate any issue. Probability-wise, I feel like we're strong, right? But the parents need to be held accountable, absolutely, what you alluded to. And also, the elephant in the room is the mental illness. This seems to be a preventable issue. I know here locally in New Jersey, I'm the chief of police, so I do issue gun permits. I also take pride in sometimes I deny permits, and that's because of mental issues. But it also falls on the psychiatrists and counselors. They take HIPAA a little too far. They can let us know if this person's struggling or whatnot, because it always seems like you'll know the person or there was some background that we should have known about.
Chief, I'm glad you said that. Like, the HIPAA laws are so strong, but so basically we'll protect somebody's feelings or not sure where their mind is, but that may turn into 3 kids getting slaughtered, 25 kids getting slaughtered. Where's the balance here? Ro, in your day in the state police, you had the responsibility as the chief of staff that you weren't just on the teams unit or on the school unit or on the major crimes unit. You had to oversee everything. Would you, in retrospect, I know this goes for the 4 of us, there's nothing worse than when we see a child get harmed. But are we taking it serious enough, or are we going, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to see it, thank God it didn't happen here? Have we had enough of that? I mean, is it time for us to hold our politicians' feet to the fire and really step up, whether it be financially or become stronger liaisons with our chiefs and superintendents?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to have a bipartisan effort that is all about with the importance and the stress on security and safety for children, teachers, parents, administrators. I think, in the state police, we always had a traditional job. We were patrolled the highways and maybe a couple towns that didn't have police departments. And as things evolved and we became more involved in the municipalities, I think that's where you had, like we talked about, mutual aid agreements, because I think we have to, just like after 9/11, big shift in our focus, right? Everything became terrorist related. So the gangs, the mobsters, they kind of went on the back burner because we shifted our focus to terrorism. Now it seems to be mental health. And like you said earlier, Tommy, with body cameras, these cops are they're like actors in a play or in a soap opera or in a reality show. They know that every move they make, every word they speak is recorded, and somebody's going to second guess their moves, every single day. So I think that as long as you stay focused on the emerging trends regarding mental health, and like the chief's right, in New Jersey, you have the luxury of denying the permit. In a lot of states, the chiefs don't have that authority. So, I think state by state, there's a lot. But New Jersey State Police made great strides in getting out there with the communities and offering their services.
I'll pitch this to all of you, and Jeff, you can expand on it a little bit, and then I'll throw it back to the chief. We just got one of our listeners and watchers saying it's more Johnny Green. It's more about the superintendents and the Board of Ed. And I kind of sometimes feel the same way. Like you want to be elected to these positions in the Board of Ed, and everybody wants to do the right thing. And then the superintendent, chief, for all intents and purposes, is the chief of the schools, if you will, overseeing not law enforcement, but the day-to-day activities of his or her schools. We take these positions. Do they need to start adjusting the way they think a little bit? Does the Board of Ed members have to turn up the heat for us citizens to the superintendents or even to the chiefs? Like, hey, chief, we want you to look at this or do better here, or this is well, what are you hearing on that end, Jeff? Any talk like that going on, or are we waiting for something bad to happen?
No, so I've got a kind of unique perspective on this, but I'm an advisory board member to the National School Safety Alliance. I've been asked to do presentations for the U.S. Department of Education. I've engaged with numerous other states on this topic. And while we all know that you can never be over-prepared, I can tell you that New Jersey is very unique. We've got politicians that are constantly pushing out, proposed legislation for schools. I was very fortunate. In direct answer to that question, you have the New Jersey School Boards Association. They're very involved. They just posted a whole study that they just did on gun ownership and gun violence. One of the things that we have to recognize is that where these guns come from, right? If we're going to talk about, who we're denying permits to and so forth, approximately 80% of the guns that are involved in school shootings come out of the home. They're not secured by the homeowner that owns the weapon, and they're obtained by the student. There's a long distinguished, if we could call it that, list of predicates to school shootings. Red Lake, Minnesota, took his grandfather, who was a tribal police officer, took his weapon, killed him in his bed with it, went to school and started shooting. Sandy Hook Elementary took one of a couple rifles that his mother placed in the home for him to use as an outlet for his mental health issues. And he shot her and killed her in bed with that weapon and went to school and started shooting. Townville, South Carolina, shot his dad in the back of the head with his own .45. And we can continue. Uvalde shot grandma in the face and went to school and started shooting. These weapons come from the home. So what are we doing as responsible gun owners, if we're going to own weapons? Are we responsible with that? And recognizing these kids aren't purchasing, they're not straw purchases coming out of another state. They're taking them out of the home of a family or friend and taking them to school and using them. When we talk about mental health, we have to be careful and recognize mental health issues aren't a driver for violence, but they can be a contributing factor under certain circumstances. And what we've had a lot of success with here in New Jersey most recently are a couple pieces of legislation that I think are very worthy of being spoken about. When we were all young cops, one of the first things we realized is it's very important to be able to protect yourself once you get out on the street, right? So as a 22-year-old trooper, they hand me 2 weapons and they send me out on the street, and I realize I'm on my own. We had no cages in the cars. We had no portable radios, no nothing, right? You're just out there in a car. And you realize you have to be able to defend yourself. When I started working in schools and started doing drill observations, one of the things I realized right away was that responding and getting safe in that emergency is very critical to the people in schools. But how do we figure out somebody wants to bring a weapon to school and start shooting their classmates? And that results in my research leading me to the concept of behavioral threat assessments. Anytime we listen to this conversation about where somebody engages in an act of targeted mass violence, almost universally, we will find some commonalities and traits and characteristics for that individual, and some very common behaviors in mobilizing going from ideation, what's referred to as the pathway to violence, ideating and mobilizing towards violence based upon a grievance. And you're going to see this come out in this case. We're already seeing some bits and pieces of it, I think, already being released. In 2019, I was fortunate enough to be one of 35 people in the country invited by the Secret Service and DHS to come up with a community-based threat assessment model. There are master trainers for this program referred to as Enter. There are 94, I believe, in the country. We have 25 in New Jersey. Just to give an idea of where we are. In the interim, on August 1st, Governor Murphy signed legislation requiring every school in the state to have a behavioral threat assessment team that is comprised of a member of the mental health community in a school counselor, a school psychologist, an administrator, a teaching staff member, an SRO, or some liaison through the law enforcement agency to be part of that team. The school safety specialist that's trained by the New Jersey Department of Education. And the idea is that we're looking for concerning behaviors all the way through threatening behaviors, and being able, and I'm sure the chief is going to get his staff are going to be rolled into this. This takes effect on September 1st. of next school year. The job of these teams is to recognize that somebody is potentially on that pathway and to leverage the protective factors and supports and resources that a school has to de-escalate that behavior and put that person on the right path. Mm-hmm. From my perspective, that is one of the most critical things we can do to recognize that somebody is troubled and escalating toward violence. And parents play a huge role in recognizing these behaviors and reporting their own children. And I can go on and on and on, a whole long list of successes that we know where a family member recognizes that this individual needs help and removes the gun from the home or secures the weapon so it's not accessible and reports to law enforcement and to the school and assists in that assessment and that de-escalation, as opposed to the example I gave you in Oxford, where we've got two parents that didn't want to buy in and said, go back to class. And we know what happened there. And now they're criminally charged. So that dynamic doesn't exist in a lot of places. The work that's being done in schools that's being done in New Jersey doesn't exist in a lot of other states to the same degree that it's being done here. But that doesn't mean we can't do more. And I think that's always has to be our drive, that, you know, we never settle, right? Where there's always a little more we can do. We can always get a little bit better. And I think the school community in New Jersey largely recognizes that. But there are always going to be those that fall through the cracks, that don't want to buy in, don't want to believe, and don't want to put the assets where they belong.
Chief, let's be honest. You know, none of us are youngsters. I know you've done over 30 years. All of us have been involved in law enforcement most of our adult life. De-escalation was not a word that we heard when we came on the job.
No.
We thought different, right? We were trained probably by war veterans or whatever, and it was more of a hands-on situation. I had the honor and privilege of creating a product that was a de-escalation tool because I knew times were changing and we had to do it. Is de-escalation in our own mind now as a cop? Are we training them enough? That are we getting in the heads of our students? Are we sharing enough information? Are the superintendents, principals, teachers got their finger on the pulse and saying, hey, this kid is a little off kiltered right now?
Yeah.
God forbid we're criticizing, right? We have kids making believe that they're cats in certain schools, for goodness sakes, right? It's got so out of control. But and I can say that, and you can bash me if you want. I just think it's out of control. And I still have a daughter, and you have a daughter, both in college. So we have skin in the game, if you will. What do we do in the future here? We've learned as veterans that de-escalation is one of the most important tools we have now in our vocabulary. But what do we do? How do we get our finger on the pulse around what these kids are doing?
Well, like you said, it does start at home. You know, we could talk all night about this. I do have concerns with video games because the training is like you're sitting in a seat and you're getting Navy SEAL training. They have access to firearms, or adrenaline's going. And if anyone has any behavioral issues, they're going to do that. I think we need to monitor the airwaves. I think we should continue to reinforce, report something. We saw it after 9/11, right? See something, say something. We got away from that campaign. Let's get back to it, right? The other concerning issue I have well, first of all, locally here in East Hanover, I don't have any issues. My superintendent, Natalie Bartlett's the first to call the PD or us anything concerning, and she will send the student out for a fitness of duty. 9 out of 10 times the kid comes back, we have a de-escalation conversation with him and really do a one-on-one in person in a field for him. I can't speak outside East Hanover. I don't want to. Morris County, I feel like, does do it right. Sheriff Gannon started an RSVP program. It's an app, behavioral threat assessment. If you see something, the kids they do report stuff, like 3 through 12. They are reporting stuff where we get a tip locally, and it's anonymous, and then we'll look into it.
You know, Ro, the Chief's right. Back in our day, and we sound like dinosaurs, we were only as good as our information.
Right.
You weren't the best detective in the world unless you had the best informant, or you had that neighborhood watch program, or you had that anonymous call. Do we need in the schools to have a drop box where kids could put, or like the Sheriff Gannon did, he created an application that basically you can, yeah, I mean, that's fantastic.
Push that out more.
But Chief Ro, why isn't that mandated? Is that something we got to push? That can't cost much money. that could be on every child's phone, and they could see something and say something through an application that could be triggered to the local PD or the superintendent or the principal. Raul, in respect, what do you think of that?
Well, I'm sure the chief and a lot of agencies, they monitor social media. These kids start posting things. That's when the de-escalation comes in. That's when the behavioral assessments come in. The de-escalation is not going to occur like it did yesterday. That was just to go in, eliminate the threat, right? There's no de-escalation, or they did de-escalate it with a gunshot. But, I think what you have to do here is, there's lists, there's indicators, there's certain things that, the mental health experts will train you on to show you what kind of behaviors. And the chief is 100% correct about, the video games and the social media. Again, it comes down to the parents. Are the parents aware of what these kids are doing? Are they aware of it? Are they reporting it? Are they afraid to report it? There are apps, but I'm sure there's a perception that if you rat out another student, that you're a rat. And we know that there's a whole bullying issue that's going on in the schools too. And that's something that I'm sure the chief has had to address. So yeah, it comes down to just a lot of awareness and a lot of buy-in from the parents, as well as the school and the community.
Jeff, popped on. Kerry Ganello is a friend of the chief and I and Robin, and her and her husband are tremendous community people, and they live in the chief's town. And she said, this is great conversation. This is great live conversation. Is that one of the things we need to do more? Do we need to talk more about this instead of hiding behind that, geez, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or that poor kid, he's got mental health issues and I feel bad for him? Or do we peel back the onion more and say, yeah, it's a poor kid, we're sympathetic to it, but I don't want that poor kid not being able to control his emotions and taking my kid's life?
Yeah, so a couple things, and I'll go back real quick to your informant example and to the conversation a little bit earlier about law enforcement in schools. One of the things that we've dealt with is, and especially post George Floyd, everybody post school shooting wants cops in the schools, and then post protest they want all the cops out of the schools. And so when I gave you that seesaw, that wave, that's one of the things we go back and forth with. I think something that is extremely important to recognize is that when we place law enforcement officers in schools, we need our parent community and our student community to recognize that the last thing we want them to do is take police action. Mm-hmm. The last thing that they're there for is to be some type of an administrative hammer that's going to take care of disciplinary problems. The first job that law enforcement officer working in a school should be doing is forging relationships with students, becoming a trusted adult that they can go to with their concerns and their issues, and to make sure that we're training our kids to recognize, because we as parents do this. We're the ones that tell them snitches get stitches. We're the ones that use the term rat. They don't learn that coming out of first grade on their own. They need to understand there's a difference between reporting and snitching. When we're reporting, we're trying to take care of everybody. When we're snitching, we're trying to take care of ourselves. We want something out of that equation to make ourselves feel better. So we need to do a better job educating kids on that difference, and then educating them, see something, say something is great. But what I find is a lot of people don't know what they're looking for or who to tell. And those reporting apps can be very helpful. There are a number of them out there. Some of them don't even cost anything. There is legislation that's been proposed in New Jersey that there be a statewide reporting app that runs through the Fusion Center at the Rock. I don't know where these things are necessarily headed. But those things are very important. And then the concept of engagement, we do have to do a better job in getting the whole school community to realize that it's not one entity's problem or concern, that we all are stakeholders in this, and that parents have to realize the behaviors that are going on around them, recognize them for what they are, and be willing to intervene. Think about this as a parent, right? We all, I've got two girls, 25 and 27. One's about to get married. One's still in college. What's the better scenario for me as a parent? Realizing that one of my children is escalating towards violence and maybe mobilizing towards a school shooting, and allowing that to unfold unchecked without any intervention by me, and have my child be a killer and probably dead at their own hands at the end of this statistically, or intervene and get some type of help before anybody is harmed, which is the better scenario for the parent, right? And I think it's easy to lose sight of that. We don't want our kids to get in trouble. Everybody's a snowplow or a helicopter parent, not my kid, I'm going to pave the way. Those are things that we have to get beyond as adults and realize that we have a job that we need to intervene on behalf of our own kid, let alone everyone else's. And I think that's something that's really hard to get out there, but we need to do a better job of.
Chief, we got 5 minutes left, and I appreciate the time and the late hour, and it's important, and it's important enough, and that's why I know the three of you are joining me tonight. But Chief, we built this fusion center called The Rock down in the state police. And potential storms, we're all the departments or counties are represented, the 21 counties. And Ro, you could correct me if I'm wrong, and I believe there's supposed to be a seat for every municipality and or sheriff's office or whatever. Chief, when you get information and you have an incredible relationship with your superintendent, and why you're on is because you're a proactive chief and you've done things different than a lot of chiefs have done, and I'm saying that, not you, haven't done. Do you share information? Does that, because, Ro and I work for a company called InfoCop. Rich Briccoli created InfoCop. And InfoCop, the reason it was created was to share information. You got pulled over in East Hanover, or you could go down to Long Beach Island, and an hour later, you could check to see, oh, this guy got stopped in East Rutherford, or he got stopped here. Are we doing that with the mental health issues yet, or we're not allowed to?
That's good. Sorry, I jumped that. We do communicate a lot. Rock's awesome. Whether we're physically there, we're in contact with the Rock nonstop. It's awesome. The Fusion Center. We do that through phone, email, and assessments. But I do have an issue with the whole look. I get the law. I get doctors. There's a HIPAA thing, but I almost want to go to that psychiatrist or counselor and say, hey, this is blood's on your hands at this point. You knew, you could have called us. And I think there's definitely, I know for a fact, you're not going to convince me that there is a communication barrier between psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists in law enforcement.
Yeah, Chief, my thought is that why do they get to play God with people's lives? Like, it just pass the torch like a race. Nobody's going to look to bash or take advantage or embarrass anybody. We're just looking to protect everybody as a whole. And that's why I get confused by the whole HIPAA. Like, I don't know which one of you said it. Did we go too far with this privacy acts? And, we're not asking you what you're taking and what you're doing in your own home and all that. But when you step out of that home and you're off kiltered a little bit and you look like you're a threat, I think everybody needs to team up for the better. And haven't we learned that lesson yet? All day, all I've heard is mental health. Great problem identifier. Now, how are we going to solve it? And, like you said, we could talk about this all night. The three of you, I appreciate it. Chief, you're a good friend. You're a proactive chief. We feel safe in our towns because we see you doing something. Listen, every cop out there is trying to do the right thing. But let's face it, some chiefs are out there doing more than others. And that's just life. I could say that my dad was one. Robin, listen to me. Robin's father was a cop in Florent Park here. Ro, your father was a chief. Jeff, you're a commander. We all had that position. I talked to Anthony Ambrose yesterday a little bit, and from the city of Newark. Anthony's been around 40 years. Whether it's suburban, inner cities, he's now got his own consultant group. We're all struggling what to do here. I appreciate you guys. Jeff, God bless you, man. You're doing everything you can in this world. That your focus is all on that. Ro, you'll never give it up because you're a doer and you always want to do the right thing by people and you're trying to make a difference in life. And Chief, I hope you stay chief for another 10 years. I don't know that makes sense for you, but it's guys like you that tell the truth. You're honest. You're not afraid to get out there. The last thing I'll say about this, I know our chief here, Canizzo, he's got his guys out of the car. He's got his guys talking to people. And one of my pet peeves is riding around with the tinted windows rolled up with the air conditioner on and nobody communicates anymore. Not under Chief Canizzo's watch. And that's probably another subject for another day. But stay safe, all of you. I appreciate your expertise. I appreciate your time. And God knows we don't have the answers. But I'll say this in ending. People, the first thing they say is we got to pray for these people. Yeah, I agree. we got to do more than pray. We have to do more than pray right now. We got to take it to the next level. So thanks, guys. Stay safe. We got 15 minutes to go. And with that, I am going to bring on a mother-daughter combination, Mia Heinhold and her mother, Christina. And Mia is a student, I believe a junior. And this girl is, full disclosure, a family friend. I have never met someone her age who has the street smarts, the world expertise. She just did a stint in Italy at 16 with a family and an exchange program. She has her finger on the pulse. Her mom is a very, very established businesswoman, but her 15 hours a day raising 4 kids and a prominent job wasn't enough, so she decided to be on the Board of Education. Miss Christina and Mia, thank you for being on the show tonight. You listen to our friend, who I know you know, Chief Canizzo, and thank God we have a chief like that in our town here who's proactive and does what he does. But Mia, my first question is to you, and although I'm a grandpa now, and they're not going to school they're going to preschool, but not real school. When you go to school tomorrow, do you think different when you see this kind of stuff on the news? Do you say, thank God it didn't happen I don't want to say where you go to school, but in our hometown? But how do you feel?
I think it definitely impacts like the atmosphere of our community at school. Everyone kind of feels, I don't know, a little bit, everyone carries the weight a little bit. It just is like, it happened here, it could happen here. Everyone's just like, you never really know who it could be next, which is, I think, the scariest part, because everyone is always like, it could never be us. It could never be, we have such good security measures or stuff like that. But I think it's just scary to know that it's happening all over the country to anyone.
Now, Christine, I know how proud of you are of her, and you have 4 children, and you know, I've been allowed to be part of your family. As a mom, I know you have one feeling, like the rest of us. It's gut-wrenching. Probably we go in our quiet little corner and cry when we see something like this. But as somebody who took on a role on the Board of Ed, do you feel an extra added pressure to make a difference, or come up with just maybe a little piece of the puzzle like Chief Canizzo talked about?
Yeah, so like Mia said, I think there's the mom, or the suburban mom, kind of feeling like it would never happen here. It's this, wonderful little community, 2 towns that merge together that share a high school, where both chiefs of police. And so you just think that not immune, not better than, just a little insulated. So when you hear about these same small towns, these same small schools, it's scary. But to answer your question, Tommy, I think that I've been brought into conversations being on the Board of Education and have a certain awareness that I wouldn't have had I just been a mom. And it's preparation of the school, partnership with the police department, preparation of our teachers. We were just at a meeting earlier this week where the teachers are asking for more development and more preparation. They go through certain drills, some a little more authentic than others. But when they really are put in those situations, the learnings that they get and the direction that they receive from the police department is invaluable. So they want more training during these professional development days, now more than ever.
And the Board of Education is willing to support that. You have a working relationship with the superintendent, with the chief. But do you think when something like this happens again, do we have to ramp it up, like I was saying to the chief? Do we have to dig down? And none of the politicians or elected officials like yourself or the mayor or the council or the chief, nobody wants to see this. And God forbid it happens on their watch in their town. But do we need more resources, Christina? Do we really have enough?
So I think, I heard them speak about the SLEO officers and folks that are at the building whose job it is to get to know the students. Absolutely. But to your point, even before that, the guidance counselors and the therapists in the school, just looking and being on alert for kids that might be struggling, kids that might be overly stressed out or feeling unusually frustrated. Or, we just got a note tonight from our chief of police on this side of the highway, just around being alert and, as a parent, monitoring your kids' social media, as a parent, understanding if there's certain mood swings or change in friend groups or big differences that you notice, of your child. So I think that goes for parents to their children and teachers to their students. Guidance counselors can't be everywhere. So it really has to start with those people that spend the most amount of time with your children. And that's going to be some teachers, and that's going to be the parents. So, and it's up to us to flag that to the counselors in the schools so they can get their arms around it sooner rather than what it's been happening.
Me, I have two questions for you. You're one of my favorite young ladies because I think you're smart, you think out of the box. But when you were in Italy, was there ever any thought, or the family you live with, do they have issues like this over there? Is this on their radar? And then I have a follow-up question I want to ask you about.
I would say that it's definitely on their radar. I mean, they hear about stuff like this in the news all the time. And especially when there's bigger school shootings. Like I remember when I was there, the one in Texas and the one in Buffalo specifically, I remember that having international news coverage because that was just such a big thing in the news. And so, yes, people there have their opinions on everything, but I think that the lives of people there and then people here, like gun control or even like access to like schools and mental health, how mental health is treated, like it's very different.
Right. The chief mentioned, and I don't know if you heard it, there's an application on the phone, basically reverts back to when you weren't even born, but mom and I remember it, see something, say something, and it kind of worked a little bit, where we're only as good as our eyes and our ears. Would you use an application like that to say, although this is my friend, I'll use the word my friend Robin, and Robin seems to be out of sorts right now, and Robin's acting a little strange. Would you feel more comfortable writing that in an app where it would go to maybe somebody where they could take it further? Would you think that our 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds mature enough to know that may save somebody's life?
I think, yes. I think that if it was anonymous, I think that would be something that more people would be interested in, just because I think you were talking about it before, the difference of being a rat and the difference of actually doing something proactive against something. So I think that if it was anonymous, it would be more appealing to people my age, just because I think nobody wants to come across like that. But I think, yes, definitely people would use it, just because I think that when you think about it on like a bigger scale, I think it's more important to kind of put others over yourself.
Again, she proves her maturity. But Christine, I'm not asking you as her mom. I'm asking you now as the Board of Education. If we do, and we do, Chief says we have an application that Sheriff Gannon, our sheriff of Morris County, put out there. Are we marketing it enough? Does the Board of Education allocate money and we start getting this message like, hey, the old back in my day, in your day, Nancy Reagan came out with, no drugs, right? We went on that drug campaign. Is it time for us to start marketing apps like this and or educate our kids better? You're not a rat. You're helping. You're actually going to help that person. By the way, not only may you save somebody else's life, you may save their life.
So I think over the last year or two, the conversations that I've been a part of, where I hear our superintendent and our chief of police have these conversations, and a few board members get invited into the conversation. I can only speak for our superintendent. When it comes to any security measures, he will always defer to the chief of police, realizing that he is not the expert. So if there's an app that the person who is in charge of our safety, our police department, our chief of police, and we would defer to them. If they think that this is a good idea, if this is a way, on the kind of boots on the ground, kids, keeping their eyes and ears open, and they would be more comfortable speaking up, I wouldn't see why the superintendent and then therefore the board wouldn't support that decision. It's just, I think we try and defer the majority of those decisions to the police department. So to the point that I was having the other day, when the teachers were asking for more of this professional development, more of these authentic kind of situations, not just your typical drills that everybody knows are coming, where the kids kind of single file line, they exit the building. There's no real kind of panic or stress that, that's sort of simulated. I think teachers need more than that.
But out of the mouth of babes, in Mia's point, she would use it and feel more comfortable if it was an anonymous app, which it is at this point.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe it's time for, not the Board of Ed, I'm not pointing the finger at them, that collectively the chief, the Board of Ed, the councils, the assembly, the Senate, maybe we need to rally around and figure out how this is a whole where it becomes the norm and we market that. It's not just for Morris County area, it's for the entire state. Well, guys, this was really important for me, and I thank you to have both of you. And Mia, again, I can't say it as much. Your mom makes a difference in this world, and I know that you're growing right into her shoes, and you're going to surpass probably all of us what you do. You're just that smart and caring and loving, and I respect you so much that when I talked about this show tonight, I said to Robin, think Mia would come on? Out of all the kids I know, you think Mia would come on? And I'm so happy you did. And thank you. And I'm going now. What happens is be careful what you wish for, because I'm going to bring you on again. And I appreciate Mom, not only as a mom, but as a Board of Ed member, because this is not pointing fingers at Florham Park or East Hanover, Morris County, Newark. A lot of people, Christina, won't come on because they're afraid they may say the wrong thing. So big thank you to you also. Thank you I know what you do. It's hard enough to raise one kid, never mind four. And I know George is a big help. I know how proud your dad is of you, because I remember when you left for Italy, he was sick to his stomach because he couldn't imagine you being there alone. But thank you both. You're both difference makers. And tonight, I'm sure you touched a lot of people with your words. So look forward to seeing you soon. Stay safe, young lady, and keep doing what you're doing, as they say. Thank you to you both.
Yeah, great night, great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Last minute or 2 minutes of the show tonight's important because, Robert and Jimmy and I do this show for NJ, on NJ. The people at our station are passionate. The calls we got today are passionate. My law enforcement buddies are hurt and passionate. I can speak for the chief and Roe and Jeff. Sometimes you feel like you're not doing enough, no matter how hard you're working. This hurts. I had my little girl today, my one granddaughter, Quinny, and God knows she was running me all around the house all day, but the TV kept popping on. I was trying to get updates, and for the grace of God, it could be one of us. And she's in a little preschool right now. So I have a responsibility. Robin has a responsibility. Jimmy has a responsibility as parents, as citizens. And I just would hope that this country wasn't Connecticut enough. Uvalde, was that enough? And now 3 9-year-old, and I'm not minimizing the custodian and the substitute teacher and the third person. It's all tragic for anybody to lose a life. These are our angels, and they're living in fear. Our angels are living in fear. I just had a 16-year-old angel on for the last 15 minutes, and her smile is beautiful, and her eyes are sparkling. But a part of her is living in fear. Why? Because the media is going to keep pumping the story as well as they should, but the media is just a problem identifier. I don't see anybody still stepping up to make a difference. So I hope that our country, like 9/11, take it as serious as 9/11. Let's rally around each other. Let's rally around each other's families. I'm not preaching. I guess I'm praying and hoping. When we're young, we feel more stronger. As we get older, I'm looking through the eyes of my grandchildren. Tonight, Chris Canizzo, thanks for stepping up. Ro Mangizi, jeez, can't mess that name up. It's been 50 years. The Heinhold family, I appreciate you both. And lastly, Jeff Gale, man, keep doing the work. educated, well-spoken, and really appreciate tonight. For Robin DiLauri, Jimmy Leyritz, the King, I'm Tommy Cetnar. Stay safe. Let's take it to the next level and protect these angels.